Good morning, everyone. I hope you had a wonderful night's sleep. I sure did. Slept through the night. It was so awesome. Of course, when I got up this morning, I had to go really bad. But that's too much information for you to know. But you know what? Everybody pees. And everybody poos. So don't make such a big deal about it, okay? Anyway, today's going to be a really interesting talk. We're going to talk about the law. I know, the law. Isn't that weird? Why do we have laws? Why are they important? Well, laws are really not for the righteous people, not for the people who live by the golden rule, but to try to gain voluntary compliance for those who are not necessarily good people. Yeah. The law kind of helps us identify those people that are not really good for society as a whole. Okay? And when you get down to the energetic frequency of these individuals, they're not really good for the planet. I know. It's hard to believe. It's hard to believe that people who are not nice, who get pleasure from stealing, from lying, from cheating, from breaking things, from committing murder, from kidnapping, to rape, to all of these violent crimes, it's hard to believe that, well, they really affect the whole world, everything in their environment. So logically, you'd think that you'd want to separate those people from society, which is important because we're going to talk about, well, I'm going to explain to you now why that is so important, why it's so important to separate those people from society and to put them in a place that is separate from good people. Yeah. So the good people aren't influenced by the bad people. We'll just put it that way. And the reason that there's influence is because everybody vibrates at a specific frequency. Yeah. You know that a person that is depressed vibrates at a different frequency than a person who is angry. And a person who is stuck in anger vibrates differently than a person who is, let's say, compassionate. And a person who is compassionate vibrates at a different frequency than a person who is in blissful love and contentment. Yeah. And you know that because of those vibration frequencies that it affects your environment. Yeah, the things around you are influenced by your resonating frequency. I know you didn't know that, did you? But if you take the time to observe, we talked about observing the other day. When we talk about observing, knowing what is true, because you have observed it for yourself, you can observe these things. Look at a person's environment who is depressed. What does it look like? Is it neat and clean and orderly? Or is it unkept? Look at the environment of a person who is angry. Is it neat and orderly and nice? No, you'll find a lot of things broken. Mhm. Look at the environment of a person who is happy most of the time. Somebody who wakes up in the morning and says, "You know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to speak a message to the world so that they can hear the good things of God. That's what I'm going to do." You just hate those people? Wait a minute. That's me. But they vibrate at a different frequency. Their whole world reflects what they are projecting out there. Interesting. So, where do we know? How do we know this? How do I know that the law is for those kind of people? Well, we find it in the Bible. Isn't it weird? It's kind of like this is a manual for living. We found out in one of our other talks that, and you don't even have to read it. As long as you're living the values that's written in the scriptures, you're going to be good to go on the day of judgment. I know. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Look at you out there screaming and yelling. What? No, you have to be baptized. You have to do all these things. It's written in the Bible. It must happen. Okay. You can be upset about that if you want, but what frequency is that? Perhaps this was written for you. I'm just messing with you. So, let me read this. I'm going to put on my magic glasses that enable me to see the Word of God more clearly. Whoa. Okay, so we're in 1 Timothy. 1 Timothy. And Paul was writing to Timothy. And First Timothy, first chapter, verse 8. But we know that the law is good if one uses it lawfully. In other words, making laws that are for the betterment of everybody. Not restricting fully, but setting some boundaries for good ways of living that are good for everyone. But we know that the law is good if one uses it lawfully. Also using it fairly across the board. Not letting other people get off because of certain favors or certain religions or certain belief systems or certain skin color or certain races or certain countries or certain... You get my meaning? That it's equal justice under the law. We try to say that that's true in the United States, but we know that it is not. I don't think it's true anywhere in the world because those in power will give favor to those who are their friends. It's just natural human reaction. And we saw that demonstrated clearly through the years of 2000, 2004, or 2020 to 2024. And started sometime before that. But we can see it clearly. clearly. Do your research. Don't believe me. I mean, I'm just a guy holding the Bible. Inspired by God, we'll say. Yeah, that's true. I'm different. So, verse 8. But we know that the law is good if one uses it lawfully. Knowing this, that the law is not made for a righteous person. Wow. How do we know who a righteous person is? Well, someone who doesn't do the following. It's but for the lawless and the insubordinate, for the ungodly and for the sinners, for the unholy and profane, for murderers of mothers, for manslayers, for murderers of fathers and mothers. Oh, sorry, I messed up here. Let me start over. Verse 9. Knowing this, that the law is not made for a righteous person, but for the lawless and the insubordinate, for the ungodly and for the sinners, for the unholy and profane, for murderers of fathers and murderers of mothers, for manslayers, for fornicators, for sodomites, for kidnappers, for liars, for perjurers, and if there is any other thing that is contrary to sound doctrine, according to the glorious gospel of the blessed God, which was committed to my trust. So, it's quite a list there. And most of our laws are written for things like that. But let me ask you this. If, let's say, you have a state, since they write the laws, you have a state that writes a law that you cannot own a pet like a cat, and we'll say you can't declaw a cat. Okay? Now, when we talk about declawing a cat, I know it seems weird, but some people do it so that they can protect their property. Because cats like to climb things, tear up the drapes, scratch on the furniture, do those kinds of things. So some people who own pets like cats like to declaw them so they don't tear up their furniture. Well, let's say that the state makes it a law that you cannot declaw a cat, a house pet. You can't declaw a house pet because it must have the ability to protect itself. Okay. Completely understand that because cats use claws as a defense. I was wrestling with my cat the other day. He decided to play a little rough. He didn't know that I'm so delicate and tender. But we were having a good time. Anyway, so they choose to declaw the cat. And the state says you can't declaw a cat because it must defend itself. Okay. Not a big deal. But it's a felony to do that. If a veterinarian declaws a cat, it's a felony. He's going to prison. But then on the other side, well, what if this same state makes a law that a human being cannot own or possess a bulletproof vest? Let's say, for example, that this particular state is known for its violent crime, for innocent people being shot to death for no reason at all, that people on the street are being attacked violently for just walking down the street. But this state creates a law that you cannot wear a bulletproof vest to protect yourself from being shot to death by the enemy. Is that creating a law that is lawful? We know that the law is good if one uses it lawfully. How can you justify that? How can you justify that rationalization? That you make it a felony so that a cat can defend itself, but you also make it a felony because a human being wants to protect himself and you don't allow it? What is up with that? And we know that that particular state, and these are true. It's not imaginary. These are actually laws on the books on one of the states in the United States of America. I know. It's crazy. More murders and shootings happen in those states than, let's say, another state that has open carry constitutional law. You know, you can go to a store, buy a pistol, strap it on your hip, and walk anywhere you want. Perfectly fine. Less murders in that state. Isn't that weird? The more freedom you give people, the more opportunities you have for a good life. We'll talk about barriers. See, there's a delicate balance between barriers, which is law. Law puts up barriers. But these laws are for so that we can capture and identify people who are not good for society and separate them so we can remove their vibrational energy field and put it in a place where it will have less effect on the rest of society. Yeah. But what else does that mean? If the vibration of a human being can affect your mind, your body, and your environment, if there's enough of them around, there's been experiments that have been done that it only takes 0.1% of the population to change or influence the behavior of that population. In other words, if over 0.1% of the population is evil, likes to murder, kill, steal, destroy, all that stuff, then it can influence the rest of the population that's within that person's or those people's consciousness and cause them to rape, murder, lie, steal, all of that. We've seen it play out. We have. But then the opposite is true too. That if you have the influence, if there's people that are happy and joyous and wonderful and all of that, yeah, they will influence their environment too. That's a proven fact. Scientific experiments have been done to prove it. Yeah. Look up the one that lowered the crime rate in Washington, D.C. by 20% because there are a bunch of happy meditators in the area. I know. It's wild. Look it up. Plan for a more perfect government. I think that's the name of the book. But look it up. See that. Oh, before I go, the influences also has to do with the media that you watch too. Because if you watch a lot of violent, hateful, stealing programs, kind of like all the FBI movies, all the FBI shows, all the police shows, all of those things, it gets in your walls. And you'll see your whole family will start to behave like those people on TV. So, not saying that it's bad, but you got to be aware of it, that it does affect you. Everything that you hear and see is all programming. All right. So, swirl that around in your noodle for a while. Please share, like, and subscribe. And until we meet again, I wish you well.